to the Designated Pundits. It's 2025, and we're previewing the Major League Soccer season for all 30 teams. On this episode, the Colorado Rapids. Glad to be back and glad to see everyone checking in on our content this offseason. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. You can find us on YouTube at The Designated Pundits. You can find us on every major podcast platform. And you can find us out at thedesignatedpundits.com. Lots of great links there, everything to share for you. Today is the Colorado Rapids 2025 season preview, and we are joined by, let me get this official title, 2024 Western Conference Beat Writer of the Year, Matt Pollard. The introduction gets longer every year. Love to see it. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, Bob. We finally got a little bit of warm weather. I'm not sure. New York, New Jersey, you guys were part of the polar, whatever crazy weather we had a couple weeks ago, and then we got more snow, and so there's still some ice in the shady parts of Denver, but we might have fake spring number one this weekend that I'm kind of looking forward to.
We're doing well. It was very cold all week, dry, but then today it was a little warmer, but it's rained all day, so it's cold and wet. Not really what you're looking for.
Okay.
Let's start on a positive note, and I've been asking everyone this on the first question of the episode. What is your favorite soccer memory from 2024?
Favorite soccer memory from 2024? This is MLS, like entirely all wide, everything, Bob?
Soccer.
Okay. So I will say I'm recently in a new relationship, and my girlfriend played college soccer actually at St. John's in New York. And so we finally, when she would have gone to school, the women's soccer environment wouldn't have been great in terms of documenting stuff as opposed to, stuff being available on streaming service. And she spoke to a friend and got some of her old highlights. And so we got to sit down and watch that together. So that was really, really nice.
Awesome. That sounds like a really good time. My wife leaves me alone during soccer time, actually. So my coveted time slot is like those LAFC games at 10:30 on Saturday. We're both public school teachers by trade, and my wife is in bed at 10:45. So it's like on my own. There we go. Like to hear that. That really sounds like a good time. Let's
MLS
now
after dark after the wife goes to bed.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get into the Colorado Rapids season preview. 15-5-16 last year. This is what I call like the Moneyball teams, like a lot of wins and a lot of losses. But hey, go try to get those 3 points. A tie, who needs them? 7th in the West, that puts you in a playoff position. 10-3-5 was the record at home. 5-2-11 was the record away. 62 goals scored, 69 goals conceded, gives you a -7 goal differential. And you were eliminated by LA Galaxy in the first round of the MLS playoffs. Of course, they went on to win the whole thing, so there's no shame in that. Let's talk about 2024.
What do you want me to say about 2024, Bob?
What do you think about 2024? How did the season go? What were the overall themes?
I think it was the most surprisingly wonderful season probably in the entire club's history. You coming out of 2023, Robin Fraser gets fired. You had all of the stuff with the protests in the game in September against New England Revolution. There was a question about ownership and what that was going to look like, whether or not they cared what was going on with the stadium. And ownership backed in, the two biggest transfer fees reportedly in the history of the club, bringing in Georgi Mihailovic from AZ Alkmaar. For between $3 and $4 million, depending on incentives. And then it was $3.5 million to make Rafael Navajo permanent after his loan, which would have expired in the middle of the summer. And then you combine that with bringing in, I think, a bunch of really good feel-good moves with some guys with national team connections, whether it's Reggie Cannon, bringing back former Rapids Academy kids, Sam Vines. Obviously, you also have to include Zach Steffen and Georgie in that conversation as well. And Chris Armas came in, I think, knowing that he wasn't a super popular hire. I'll admit it, Bob, I think there were two people in the entire universe who thought that this was going to work, and it was President Porrick Smith and new head coach Chris Armas. And they proved a lot of people wrong. They proved a lot of doubters wrong, including myself. And they did, I think, a really good job of creating a fun club culture for the players that I think the fans fed off of, and then the players fed off of the fans, and so there was a more a family or an atmosphere like they were all in this together, not unlike in a maybe a High School Musical kind of way. And they played some fun soccer and they scored a bunch of goals. And yes, the team was unsuccessful ultimately in the final month of the season as they dropped down the standings. They ended up being a lower seeded team and they ran into the Buzzsaw, who are the LA Galaxy. I do think Rapids fans since then feel slightly better knowing what LA Galaxy went on to do, going on to win MLS Cup. And we had an absolutely wonderful and unexpected cup run in Leagues Cup that led to CONCA Champions qualification. And probably one of the, I would argue, the biggest scalp in the history of Colorado Rapids in beating Club America in terms of the status of the opponent that they're playing, certainly. And regardless of what happened in Rocky Mountain Cup or what happened in the playoffs or what happened on decision day, watching Zach Steffen absolutely take the piss in that Champions League, or excuse me, in that Leagues Cup game, in penalties, in, you know, a stadium full of Club America fans, I think is a once in a generational experience for an MLS team. And that's something that Rapids fans are always going to have as an absolutely wonderful memory.
Love it. Leia, that was a year of huge improvement for Colorado. I think the previous year you had a 5, 12, and 17 record, only 5 wins, 3 home wins. You eclipsed that points total in the first half of the season from the previous year. So yeah, from an outsider, certainly a year of growth. Chris Armas, I had good things to say about Chris Armas. I always do. I do think that he is a professional quality coach. And I mean, you took a huge step forward, so you have to be happy with what they put on the field. Let's look at the contributors who brought you some of those wins. Rafael Navarro, 15 goals, 1 assist. You had Georgi Mihailovic with 11 and 10. Cole Bassett, 9 goals, 7 assists. Kevin Cabral, 5 goals, 2 assists. Calvin Harris with 3 and 3, and Jonathan Lewis also with 3 and 3. When we look at this chart, it is a little bit top heavy, but you had some guys like Cole Bassett, Kevin Cabral step up, who I might not have expected to see on this sheet earlier in the season. Let's talk about these contributors and kind of the pecking order here.
Yeah, even though Navajo's top in terms of number of goals scored, I'll start with Georgi Mihailovic, who had the most goal contributions of the season, and he was really the straw that stirred the drink. I think the big thing, Bob, that I think really led to the success that you had, and yes, it's top heavy, but it's top heavy with like 3 really, really good contributors. So maybe this isn't a DC United with Benteke getting, I think Benteke won the Golden Boot. I don't remember how many he had, but I'd be willing to bet you there's more than a 4-goal gap between what Benteke scored and then the second highest goal scorer on the year for DC United. And so there was an injury to Connor Ronan in the first leg of the Rocky Mountain Cup, 3 games into the season. So this might have been still in March. It might have been first weekend in April. And in the middle of a game, Cole Bassett had to move back into a double pivot where normally it would have been him and Georgie up top in the 3 in the 4-2-3-1. And so he had to move back. And quickly we found out that this is actually Cole Bassett's best position. Yeah. Bob, I don't know how much you're paying attention to individual media, but one of the memes of my interactions post-game with Cole is every couple of months or at least once a year, I'll ask him about a new position that he's playing in, whether or not he thinks it's good, and what actually is Cole Bassett's best position as well. I could clip together going back to 2019 when he signed with the club of all the different times I've asked him this. And I think even though he was a number 10 in the academy, and even though he debuted as a number 6 under Anthony Hudson, we won't talk about those years, I think we finally found the perfect marrying of what he's actually good at and a position that fits him perfectly in a formation that fits him. And that's in a double pivot that's allowing him to be a conduit for creating offense. And that makes it really, really easy to get the ball to Georgi Mihailovic. That's generally a good thing for the Colorado Rapids. And then Navajo, he does not, if you look at his highlights with the Rapids, if you look at his highlights of his time playing in Brazil, he doesn't really have a signature move, or there's not one thing that he's great or elite at. I guess to use Benteke, it's all headers. Like, don't put the ball to his off foot as you will. Navajo does a little bit of everything well, and so that allows him to ad-lib, while Georgi Mihailovic is ad-libbing to create for him and some of the other role players, some of whom you have on this list, with Cole Bassett providing that quick, direct transition play initially to make it easy on them, and then also arriving as well. So there was a real, once they got really 7 to 10 games into the season, I think there was a real harmonization of what they were trying to do attacking-wise. Georgie started playing well. He started getting goal contributions. He started then creating better chances for Navajo. He converted those. A lot of those were penalties. A lot of those were Chris Armas specifically coaching the team to try and draw penalties, not in like a like, let's just go down in the box and hope that we get a call kind of way, but like, let's go at guys which forces them to try and challenge us, and either we beat them and get a good scoring opportunity, or they commit a foul in the box and the referee has to make that decision at that point. So some of them were kind of quick gimmies in that regard. But so even though it is top heavy, I would argue that I'd say Georgie is the best player on the Colorado Rapids. I would say Cole Bassett is the most important. Hoffa, despite being the highest goal scoring on the team, is maybe he's the luxury player in that everything has to be happening further downfield for him in order for him to be extremely effective. But when those three are clicking, this team absolutely was able to be a giant killer in Leagues Cup. And I think if all three, Cole Bassett was out for the entirety of the playoffs, and Georgi Mihailovic was playing functionally on one angle. If those two guys are fully healthy, I'm not saying that the LA Galaxy don't advance out of that 3-game series, but I think we definitely go back to a third leg in LA.
Absolutely. Now, the pronunciation here. I always went with Navarro. I think most people do. That is not the correct pronunciation as to your...
Rafael Navarro.
Okay.
Yes.
H's instead of R's. That's...
In Brazilian Portuguese, actually, funny little tidbit here, Bob, R-A actually goes ha as opposed to ra. So Navarro accidentally was referring to them as the Colorado Hapids. So we had the Happy Hapids as opposed to the Rapids.
Awesome. Like the Yankees here, you could walk down, any Bronx street, and you will hear all kinds of takes on that. Outgoing players. We got to talk about some players out, players in. Lulis Abubakar is out. Remy Cabral, Jonathan Lewis on the left wing out. Jasper Lafelsend and Miguel
Navarro.
Okay.
Yes, it's all very confusing, Bob. Bob, I don't know how much. Do you remember Axel Schuberg, center back for the Rapids? Swedish guy?
No, I don't.
No, okay. He was Swedish. He was the tallest player in MLS at the time. It's actually pronounced Axel Huiberi, but there were like 3 different years of like the Rapids community and the club deciding how to ultimately pronounce it before we got to Axel Schuberg. Sjoberg, and there's some accents on one of the vowels. I can't remember which. But
in Red Bulls, we only have Alex Muil, Alex Mule. A lot less interesting there.
We are used to confusing pronunciations of last names, including ones where we have 2 guys on the team with the same last name spelled that are pronounced differently. Very perfect. Confusing.
Of these players, I mean, Jonathan Lewis, I remember when he was like a young budding star, he's going to be the next starter, kind of turned into a super sub for a lot of his career. Abubakar was a good defender, one you could track really easily all over the field with the the hair in the very very easy. I like when players look a little different. What are the losses here? What's the biggest loss?
I'd go back even further, Bob, to say the biggest loss in the last year has been Moise Bombito, who obviously they sold to France for record outgoing transfer fee for a center back in the history of MLS. I will say, on the whole, with what they plan to do tactically, with Zach Steffen in goal, and then sometimes playing in a 3-4-3 as opposed to a 4-2-3-1, and the 2 FC Cincinnati center backs they brought in, I think they've mostly filled that hole. But for the purposes, Lulis Abubakar was a slightly above average replacement center back for the Rapids. He was the longest tenured player on the Rapid along with Cole Bassett going into this year. And he was a really, really good fan favorite. Everybody loved his hair, obviously. I did a really good piece on him for Burgundy Wave where he opened up about his path as, a Muslim, and then what that looked like living in America, given the diatribes about that. We won't go into a geopolitical conversation, Bob. And that was around Ramadan. He was talking about how, in Colorado, you have to, if you're eating something, it has to be before the sun gets up. We're at altitude. So, that can be 5 a.m. sometimes. And so the club was really accommodating to that. And Lulis was just a really good guy and a really good human being to have around in the locker room. So I think we'll certainly miss him. Granted, I do think the Rapids have brought in Chido Awaziam, who I think is a better player on paper than him. And Ian Murphy, another young center back who, started half of the games in a regular season on a team that set the points total and won a supporter shield for FC Cincinnati. Doing that as a second, third year guy out of the super draft is nothing to snuff at. So I think they'll be okay at that position. None of the other ones are really that significant. Remy Cabral was mostly with R2 and then was on loan in the USL Championship. Miguel Navarro was loaned out, and the Rapids cashed in on him from Talleres in Argentina after they brought in Sam Vines. So I think that was some good Rapids math, a good bit of business, even though he actually never wore a Rapids shirt in an MLS game. Jonathan Lewis, I think it was time, honestly, Bob. I thought he was brought in and Robin Fraser knew him and really got some good stuff out of him. He'd been a little bit injured. Chris Armas likes working with young players, not saying that Johnny's old or anything, but they've got the Generation Adidas kid from last year, Kamani Stewart-Baines. They've got a couple of other young wingers they got in the draft pick. They drafted 9 players in the MLS Super Draft. So, they've got young guys that Johnny's potentially taking minutes away from. And we know what Jonathan Lewis is. He's a super sub in MLS who's going to have a really good month and score a banger goal, and then he might be a little bit injured, and then he's mostly going to be a role player. I've reported that he's been that there's some interest now that he's a free agent with Toronto FC, and especially now that Robin Fraser is back up there, I wouldn't be surprised in them reconnecting as well. I don't think he was a good servant. He won't be missed from a production standpoint, given some of the other young players that they have. Super excited about the 2 FC Cincinnati center backs who've come in. Cheeto and Ian Murphy, their analytics are off the chart in terms of building out of the back from a center back standpoint. And that was really the 2 big drop downs that you had from selling Moise Bombito and then having Lawless have to start as opposed to be the first guy off the bench, is that Lawless was a little bit older and a little bit slower. You might remember that super long run that Bombito had against Inter Miami that was clocked by Opta as the fastest sprint by any player in MLS last year and made him go viral. And Lawless can do that occasionally. He can't do that 3 or 4 times a game. Bombi was doing that 3 or 4 times a game. And then the other thing was just playing out of the back and being a little bit more creative. Lawless was very much more a center back. I'm going to pass it to my D-mid. I'm going to pass it to my fullback. I'm going to pass it back to the goalkeeper. So I think they've got a little bit more in that I'm excited about. And so combined with that, I think tactically the Rapids will be better defensively. So you talked about how the Rapids were a very exciting team. They scored a lot of goals. They conceded a whole lot of goals. I think they will be better off defensively in that regard. And I don't see anything in the outgoings that's going to be a significant negative in terms of the goal contributions. One of 3 or 4 super young wingers, maybe Calvin Harris, steps up a little bit. And we'll miss Jonathan Lewis because fans liked him. We won't miss him from a number of goals and number of assists the Rapids will have scored by the end of the year.
And you guys got him for almost nothing from NYCFC at some point. I remember that was a very interesting kind of turn in his career there. Now, of the players incoming, Sam Bassett, is that...
Yes, that is Cole Bassett's younger brother by about 20 months. Sam just finished out his 4 years playing at DU. DU soccer has been really, really good locally. They made it to the Final Four for the first time. And I can't remember if it was the first time ever or the second time in X number of years. Sam Bassett, I should say, was a finalist for the Mac Herman Trophy winner award and is very, very similar to Cole Bassett. I would say that he's a little bit more... He wants to be closer to goal in terms of the build-up play. So while I think he could be, at some point, Bob, we will for sure see Sam sub on for Cole, and that'll be a nice little moment for the brothers as well. But I think right now probably that Sam Bassett's primary role or easiest way to getting minutes will be in subbing on for Georgi Mihailovic. Georgi played every minute of every single game, and then he went off to the Olympics. He put on, I think it was 4 or 5 Rapids players were in the top 10 this year in MLS all comps for distance covered. And so that was Cole. I think Andreas Maxu was on that list as well. And I think Georgie was as well prior to going and joining the Olympic team. If Sam Bassett can take 500 minutes off of Georgie's legs to where he's fully healthy come the playoffs, I think they'll be okay. But exciting to have and certainly a really, really fun experience. And the first question, the opening question that we got from Rapids Media Day was about Sam's kind of credentials vis-a-vis his brother, and the academy director for the Rapids was like, just to be clear, we did not sign Cole Bassett's younger brother. We signed a player who's absolutely deserved it. And if you speak to anyone who's been following college soccer this year, they would agree with that statement.
Love to hear it. That should be a nice addition there. Now, this is a depth chart I had to throw together because that's part of the show. There are a couple errors. Actually, this is the previous version. I would have, for example, I put Reggie Cannon above Keegan Rosenberry in the final. But this is just kind of a little throw together that I have. From the goaltender position, you have Zach Steffen, a guy who went overseas and was supposed to be the next U.S. men's national team keeper, the plug-and-play guy, and he was not getting minutes, so he had to make a choice. I like the choice. I think if you want to be a part of a national team, you need to be playing every day in your club. He certainly did that, and he's certainly an attribute to this club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought Zach was really good. I know there was a lot of talk last year, Bob, with some of the the Rapids were shipping goals in a couple games where I don't think necessarily it was his fault. And then I don't remember who put this out there originally. It wasn't me. I know Doyle picked it up on Extra Time. Rest in peace, Extra Time Radio. But I don't know that he was the original one who posted it. American Soccer Analysis has a number of fun, fancy stats, one of which for goalkeepers is post-shot expected goals, or post-shot expected goals versus actual goals conceded. And it's crudely tracking the actual quality of your shot-stopping ability in a vacuum without all of the other things that could go into that. It's simply looking at XG versus goals against necessarily. And Stefan's numbers on that were like historically bad. He was having, in the history of the statistic, he was having the worst first half of a season that any MLS goalkeeper had ever had. He covered that up. He'd gotten a little bit better. Obviously, he had the great run in Leagues Cup, which was not included in American Soccer Analysis's metric on that. They were only tracking MLS regular season and playoff games as well. So I think that helped him a bit. And regardless of what was happening from a shot-stopping standpoint, he was doing that while organizing a defense that was having to go from Moise Bombito to Lawless Abubakar, had a couple of other injuries as well, and his playing out of the back was still really, really solid. Now, he did give up a couple howlers towards the end of the year. You'll remember that shot, the clearance that he had in that second playoff game against LA Galaxy, where he's pressed by Gabriel Peck, and Peck manages to get it deflected off of him, and it rolls into the far corner of the net. So there's some, not good mistakes that Zach needs to clean up on that I think he is aware of, and goalkeeper coach Chris Sharpie are aware of certainly. But I think we're really excited to see what Stefan can do. And I think there's some stuff that they're going to do tactically that is going to make him a little bit more comfortable. And I spoke with Stefan this past week as he rejoined the Rapids down in preseason in Mexico. And he said that it's what the Rapids are going to do with him this year is really similar to what Poch is expecting of his goalkeepers as well. So if Stefan's playing really well for the Rapids, doing very similar things, presumably he's in the conversation for the Gold Cup.
Absolutely love that. You got to be playing every day. And that's, rust is rust. You can never know, no matter how much you can simulate a practice, it's not the same as when you do it for real. We talked about the center back position a little bit. Maxu will be pairing with Ian Murphy, Chidozie Awazim, and Daniel Chacon. I have Awazim and Maxu as the starting pair. Is that how you see that going down?
The two most veteran ones. I will say we don't have a lot of data on where Chris Armas sees the depth chart at right now. In every single preseason game that he's had like two hybrid lineups. So rather like normal starters start the first half, and then like R2 and some academy kids start the second half. It's been two mixing and matching, and he's actually had Maxu with Ian Murphy, and then Cheeto with Michael Edwards, who just re-signed with the club as well. So a young guy and a veteran guy, and then also a guy who was on the team last year and a guy who wasn't on the team last year, and two guys who haven't necessarily played together. I would agree with you on this one as of right now, Bob. The rumors about Maxu supposedly having some interest from the Middle East have mostly gone quiet. So if he's staying, I think the two veteran center backs who I think complement each other experience-wise, and then one's been in the MLS for a while now, and then Cheeto coming into his first full season. He was a signing in the summer for FC Cincinnati. I don't have any complaints about that. If those are the two starters against LAFC, I will not be disagreeing with Chris Armas.
I have Sam Vines out on the left and Reggie Cannon starting on the right with Keegan Rosenberry. MLS, how many years? A lot. Love that.
Keegan's part of the furniture.
Fair enough. Let's talk not only about the fullbacks, but about what their duties are on this team with the play style.
Yeah, this is a really good question for me, Bob, because we saw Reggie Cannon played in both fullback positions at times last year when Keegan Rosenberry had a little bit of squad rotation when they had some fixture congestion and were really tired coming out of Leagues Cup. Keegan Rosenberry is the captain for this team, and I think it'd be really hard to bench or not have, the captain be regularly appearing. And Sam Vines had some good moments last year, but had, some really tough stretches. And I will say what's been being asked of them this year, or what's being asked of them by Chris Armas, is different from what Robin Fraser was doing previously. And why is that relevant? Because Sam Vines' last time with the Colorado Rapids prior to last year would have been 2021, where he balled out. They finished top of the Western Conference. He got a call up to the Gold Cup, and then Royal Antwerp came in and bought him mid-season when Robin was playing mostly in a back three, back five, and Sam Vines was being a wing back as opposed to a regular fullback in a back four. And we've seen that while sometimes they get forward, like the fullbacks are the ones where they're getting forward, but then not necessarily, they don't have the same freedom to find the game. And then there's other defensive responsibilities while they're in possession. That's perfectly fine for Keegan Rosenberry. He's a natural fullback. He's a defend first and then do attacking stuff secondly. Sam Vines is much more of a modern wing back where it's he wants to go attack, even when his primary responsibility or one of the things that he'll be told about is doing things defensively. And so I think Sam has had to be a little bit more restrained. So it's maybe a slightly misshapen puzzle piece they're trying to fit in. It's year 2. Sam's coming back into the club. Maybe he's resettling some stuff going on off the field as well. So just like with Zach Steffen, I think there might be some slight tweaks that, coming out of the offseason to where that'll be slightly different. But yeah, I do think it is a very good question. You've got 3 really good center backs, one who's been an MLS stalwart and who is your captain and is Mr. Consistency, and Keegan Rosenberry. You've got 2 young guys who've come back after maybe some underwhelming and frustrating experiences in Europe, some stuff they couldn't control, certainly. And those 2 guys want to get back in the national team. And just like with Zach Steffen, they have to actually play. You've only got 2 fullbacks. Bob, unless we're creating a triangle pitch here and MLS is going to go with that, there's no third fullback that's coming on here. So I do think this is the position where naturally we'll see the most rotation. I don't know that any one of these 3 guys, unless they absolutely ball out, is getting 2,000 minutes, but I think all of them are absolutely getting 1,200, 1,300 combined. And I do think the one thing that would happen would mostly be Reggie Cannon switching sides and then the other one going to the bench. But I think it's a really good question. And given what we've seen in preseason, I don't have a good answer right now as to between the 3, who's starting, who gets the most minutes this year right now.
Moving up to midfield, we have Cole Bassett and Connor Ronan. Let's hope they're healthy. Let's hope they can, be there every day. That's kind of set in stone, right? Is there one that's more of a 6 or more of an 8?
Well, Cole Bassett's definitely the more going forward one of the double pivots. Certainly, we saw that be absolutely fantastic this past year. For my money, Cole Bassett should have been a best 11 midfielder. But I do think it's an interesting question as well, Bob, of who's in what role, who's actually starting in the double pivot and who's in what roles, because we saw the Lamine Diack experiment did not work last year. Ollie Laraz absolutely balled out and he was willing to do defensive work, but this was a weakness that the Rapids had. And in particularly, they got weaker down the middle when Bombito wasn't there to kind of cover up for some of those mistakes. But it's kind of a, who's going and when and in what situation. That's something that it took a while for the Rapids to figure out. But once you kind of have that settled, you kind of want to have it be with the same 2 guys. But you've got Ollie Laraz, who's been fantastic. He can go forward as well. He doesn't mind doing defensive work, though he and Connor Ronan probably have the best chemistry between the 2 of them as well. And then you also just signed Cole Bassett's younger brother in Sam. So, you've got 4 guys who could play in a position to where there's only 2 of them. It was a position that was a point of weakness for the club last year, and they still haven't signed that actual number 6 to be the one playing next to Cole Bassett. So I think it's an interesting question here, Bob, I would argue the Colorado Rapids have 2 box-to-box 8s, 2 number 10s, a regular 8, and a regular 6. And they don't actually have a regular 6. And what they're doing is somebody's going to have to play that regular 6. I don't have any complaints about how you have it as right now. But again, I think we'll see a lot more. We'll see more rotation and more subs for it, where I think it's a more likely possibility that Reggie fits into one of the fullback positions and the Rapids just run with that for a while because of the type of player that he is as well. I think we will see more mix and matching and more situational partnerships between what's going on in the double pivot.
I like that a lot. Up to the number 10, Georgi Mihailovic. What can you say? I mean, he could have been one of the MVPs of the league last season. Certainly put on one of those performances. Injured last year, and I thought his postseason injury was quite significant. He was stretchered off. I thought, oh man, I hope he's not going to miss a significant amount of time. I could not find any updates, so it seems like that is not the case. It seems like he's going to be ready for opening day.
Yeah, no, he'll be fine. He wanted to be made available for the playoff game, so he refused to get a scan because he didn't want to get the result and then find out that it was going to be something bad. He did mention on media day that he was going to be called up for the January camp, but the injury it would have been to the point where he would have had to have been playing when he was supposed to be just ramping up, and the club and him didn't necessarily wanted to risk that. So maybe Georgie would have been playing in the Diego Luna role in that game against Costa Rica. But so Georgie's been practicing fully. He played in the preseason game earlier today. He played in the preseason game. I expect him to be fully available. He's fit and healthy. So is Cole Bassett.
Okay. Moving up to the top 3 now, I have, center forward, Rafael Navajo, and then Kevin Cabral out right. I had no one for left wing. I kind of plugged and played Omer Fernandez, a guy that we know quite well from his time in Red Bull, kind of a number 10 attacking kind of guy. Not someone I would necessarily label as a left winger, but I'll throw him there in a pinch. Why not? Let's talk about the interchange between these three guys and what the depth looks like there.
Oh, yeah. Hoff is going to be the starter. He's the DP number 9. He'll hopefully be the one taking penalties, and it's his job to score 15-plus goals this year. I would actually probably flip them, to be honest with you. Bob, in terms of the wingers, I'd have Kevin on the left and Omer on the right. At least that's generally what we saw from Chris Armas last year. And then it was really it was a situation, who's playing well, who's healthy, kind of a situation between Omer and Calvin. And there were plenty of games. It was like clockwork in that whoever starts, the other one was going to sub in for the other one in the 65th minute. But so, I think Kevin Cabral's back as well. And he just got his green card, so he's a domestic player. I have heard rumblings that there could be some massaging of the MLS roster rules that would make Kevin Cabral able to become a TAM player at some time this year. So that would potentially free up a DP slot or a year 22 slot for the Rapids at some point this season as well. Omer, I thought he was underwhelming for me, given what the Rapids paid to get him in free agency, and given that he was reuniting with Chris Armas. I think there were a bunch of reasons behind that, honestly. Like, he didn't get going in terms of, by the time he had a good form or a good series of form, or a couple of good games in a row, like there was an international break and they didn't have any games, or there was a minor injury or something like that, or something else. So, it was kind of a stop-start season for him, certainly. I'd be curious to see if he plays better. I've really liked what I've seen from Calvin Harris, and last year was the best season that he's ever had in MLS, and he wants to step that up. So, okay, Jonathan Lewis is gone. You've got these two young emerging players. I've already mentioned KSB, Kamani Stewart-Blaines. The Rapids have 4 or 5 players who could play in that role. One of them's going to hit, whoever hits and plays. If it's Omer Fernandez, I'd be absolutely happy with 2025 being the hashtag year of Omer.
Love it. Let's move on from the depth chart and just talk about some 2025 storylines. I pose them as questions, but they're just kind of things we're going to track throughout the season. Can Colorado take another step forward? They were completely uncompetitive 2 years ago.
Yeah.
This past year, they were competitive. Can they get to being really good? Can they improve their home record? Kind of make Colorado a fortress again. What does another step forward even look like at this point?
I think it comes down to playoffs and actually playing good in those moments as well. Bob, I think we know how much the Rapids don't spend. We know what KSE's like and everything. Rapids fans have been complaining about that forever. And we know that while we like Rafael Navajo, and while we like Georgi Mihailovic, and we do think this is overall a very balanced team, we know there's going to be a lot of games this year where they're going to be at a talent deficit. Denny Bouanga is a better player than any player on the Colorado Rapids. So is Ricky Puig. So is Sebastian Driussi. We don't even need to mention Lionel Messi, Cucho Hernandez, etc. So when we get to those critical games, like a Conca Champions match against LAFC, that if they win that, they're going to get Columbus. If we talk about a Leagues Cup game, like going up against the biggest and most expensive team in Mexico in Copa America, in Club America. And if we talk about getting to a playoff game where you're going to play an LAFC, an LA Galaxy, a Seattle Sounders, you are going to be at a talent deficit. You're probably going to be a lower seeded team. So also they're going to have home field advantage. And this is a team that has not advanced in the playoffs since 2016 when they beat LA Galaxy on penalties. So I think that's the next big question for me. I do think overall, while the roster has mostly been the Rapids running it back, I think Calvin Harris can get 10% better. I think Kolbasa can get slightly better. We already talked about little things tactically that I think Armas can do differently. Help out Zach Steffen so the team looks better defensively. Help out Sam Bynes so they get more production out of their fullbacks as well. Make sure that Georgi Mihailovic is healthy and rested, get some minutes to Sam Bassett. So I think there's other ways without spending $5 million, $7 million on a designated player. But if they do those things, then I think they'll be okay, or I think they'll be in a better position to be competitive in those high leverage games, like a first round playoff match that you have to win against LAFC.
That's all I have to do.
Yes, just beat LAFC in the playoffs, and you will have taken a step forward.
2025 predictions. Let's talk about the first 3 questions are very closely related. What is a realistic season outcome? What's the team's best outcome? And what's the team's worst possible outcome? And I think that this team has a huge range of outcomes that might be possible. Yeah. I think that the most likely scenario is improve a few points on 2024. Maybe 1 or 2 of those draws turns into a win, or a couple of those losses turn into a draw. I don't think that it's in availability to jump 4 spots. I think, 4, 5, 6, probably closer to 5, 6 would be a really nice landing spot. And I would say worst possible outcome is like 12th or 13th. You're a couple injuries away from really being in trouble here. But the best possible scenario, I don't think this is an MLS Cup contending team, but I think they're a team that can win a playoff series.
Yeah, no, I think this is a team that can, at their best, be in that dark horse tier. And this is a team that could be a really, really tough out for a team that's struggling, that's not fully healthy. I agree generally with your sense here, Bob. If you told me right now, I would take 4th right now. If you're telling me that the Rapids get home field advantage in that first, round of 3 as well, and the Rapids are 5th, are 4th in the Western Conference. Let's say, I don't know, I feel like Minnesota's been doing some really good stuff. San Jose might actually be good this year, which is kind of a scary and weird thing to think about. But so, yeah, I think if it was 4th place, I'd be over the moon in terms of what they did in the regular season. I think especially given that the clubs in Conca Champions, which is early on in the year, I think there's a very good probability. I think it's more likely than not they're eliminated by LAFC in that at that point they will have only played 1 game, and it's a road game against St. Louis, in which I think they'll be able to get a result in there. Then you've got Leagues Cup, which has had some simplification to the structure as well, which I think will be a net positive for that competition and for the Rapids later. And you don't have Open Cup. I think you need to go all in on the regular season. And I think we saw the Rapids chase down Leagues Cup because of an opportunity there. And I'm not faulting that decision at all. But eventually that bill came due, and that bill came due in late October, and Kolbasa got hurt, and Georgi Mihailovic got hurt, and you lost in 2 games to LA Galaxy, and the aggregate score was, I think, 9-1. Now, granted, there were a bunch of goals in stoppage time, and so the Rapids were throwing numbers forward, and they kind of lost the plot at that point. But so I think you need to go all in on the regular season to get the highest possible seed, to where then those situations get a little bit easier. And I think they can do that, and I think they will do that. And I think this is a team that can finish 5th or 6th in the Western Conference.
I think that could be a good thing, but I'm sure with the way things had been going for a while, if you're just 500 again, I'm sure there'd be a lot of people happy with that. Recharge a little bit in the off season. You do have 3 DPs, so those are all taken care of. So you don't have a whole lot of roster movement. That's why you're one of the earlier previews, because I don't need to worry about you making a signing like Orlando just did that we didn't get to talk about on the show last night. But great. Thank you so much for being here to preview this season. We'll have to do this again real soon and catch you again. Let us know where we can find your work.
Yeah, you can check out all of my written work at burgundywave.com. You can check out the podcast Holding the High Line with Rabbi and Red. Find it wherever you're listening to this. If it's not live on YouTube or live through, I don't know what platform you're on exactly, Bob, but wherever you get your podcast, Holding the High Line with Rabbi and Red, you can find us there. And you can follow me. I am still on the Bird app at LWS Matt Pollard, but we're also doing a lot of stuff on Blue Sky as well.
Absolutely. Same. We're everywhere. YouTube, everywhere you want to be, like we're MasterCard or whatever their slogan was back in the day. Thank you so much. Been a great time. And thank you everyone for checking in. Remember, all 30 teams are being previewed on this channel. One of the only places you can find team previews. We're keeping them short. We're keeping them sweet. You got to know your team, but you got to know your opponents too. Thank you guys for checking in, and thank you for watching the Designated Pundits.